G'day viewers, today we're going to give you a demonstration of a typical installation of a Green-Tech fuel saver into a typical passenger car sedan. So in this case we're using a Green-Tech G11, which is a typical product for a gasoline or petrol powered engine with a car with a fuel tank up to 100 litres. And this is a fairly standard installation. We'll be going in through the back seat and installing into the top of the fuel tank. Okay, now also keep in mind, if you're doing this for yourself, you should have gotten your Green-Tech fuel saver fuel log, and you should have completed the top half of your fuel log so that you have your baseline fuel reading before you do your installation, so you know what your car's fuel consumption already is. Okay, so if you're wanting to find out what your changes are, you need to have done that part first, or have kept your own records. Okay, typically to get the back seat out, usually they can be different on different cars, but in this case it's just a question of lifting up and unclipping the front edge of the seat, and we take the back seat straight out. And what you'll now be able to see is the fuel cover access hatch, and that's what we're going to open next. Okay, in this particular case Toyota like to glue these things down, and the glue is reusable, so you can just pull it off and put it back, because every time you have your fuel filter changed in your normal servicing, they're going to take this cover on and off again each time they do that. So just got to be a bit careful with it. I'm just going to get a screwdriver, so just film anything, and it doesn't really matter. Okay, once we've lifted the lid up, what I've done is I've pushed the rubber boot through a bit to allow some slack in the cable, and we're going to unplug the wiring from the pickup sensor. Now you may have to use a screwdriver to lever a catch, and that will just come off for you. Okay, and the next thing we've got to do is disconnect. We'll put that out the way. Is to disconnect that fuel line. Now there can be pressure in the tank when you go to do this, so one thing we do is we take the fuel cap off the car on the outside, and that'll relieve any fuel pressure in the tank itself. So anytime there's any retaining clips, be very careful as you take them out, because you don't want to lose them. Okay, now once we've removed the retaining clip, which we've got there, just put that aside so we don't lose it, and we'll just make sure our pipe is going to come loose, which it is. I won't take it right out just yet. I'll go around and remove all of the bolts. And just keep in mind, with some vehicles, some different model cars, these may not be held in with screws like this. They may have a big screw-on collar, which may require a special tool to take off. If you're unsure, then check with your dealer, who will be able to tell you. And if it's a particularly difficult job, then I would suggest that you have a dealer do this for you rather than do it yourself. Okay, so get a little bit of petrol there, and just remind everyone, petrol is hazardous. If you're going to have smoko now, don't light your cigarette in here. Okay, so then that cover will then just come out. And there it is. The reason we've gotten a fair bit of fuel on this occasion is that the tank is actually very near to full. Okay, so I'm just going to put this out of the car for a minute. We're installing is the G11, okay, which is for a gasoline or petrol driven car, not diesel, for a tank up to 100 litres in size, and this one I think is about 75, so it's well within range. So we're going to install the air refiner later, but for this part of the operation we're just going to fit the fuel tank sensor. Now basically all you got to do with that is drop it into the tank. One thing that I do suggest is that in some cases the tank may have an entrapment area directly below the fuel pickup point to stop fuel from surging around where it's being picked up from. So there could be a barrier there. So rather than drop it straight in, drop it a bit to one side is usually better. So this is your whole installation. You ready? Here it comes. That's it. It's done. So that's gone to work immediately, and in 30 minutes the fuel in the fuel tank will be treated. So while that's happening, what we're going to do is just put the car back together. Okay, so obviously the reassembly process is just the reversal of the disassembly process. If you just pay attention to little features such as the mounting holes and so forth may be they may not be in a perfect circle. That things might have to go back in an exact place so that pipes will reach where they came from and all that sort of thing. So when you take it apart, just pay attention to where things line up when you take it apart, and just make sure that you put it back together in the exact reverse method that you took it apart. Ensure that all your screws are tight, and ensure that your fuel tank clips and those sorts of things are put back together. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this one back together, and then we'll go ahead with the air refiner installation. So you do actually have to line this up. That goes there, and that goes there. Holes line up and the divots line up. That's all lined up, and that can reach where it came from. Okay, so that's all back together again now. If you've got a sealed on plate like this one was, just make sure you've got it firmly pressed down all the way around, because part of the purpose of that seal is to stop petrol smell coming up from under the car into the cab. Once you've finished with all of that, if you've spilled any petrol anywhere around the sheet metal underneath the seat, make sure that you clean all that up before you put the back seat back in. Otherwise you'll have a very smelly motor car, and you won't want smokers in it. So clean all that up and put your back seat in, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and fit the air refiner. So back seat going in. Just make sure to pick up your seatbelt buckles.
Oh yes, that's a good point.
Make sure you get all your seatbelt buckles and feed them back up through their respective positions. Okay, so there's our back seat back in. We've got all our seatbelt buckles back up through the holes where they belong, and everything's back. Now that's how you do that's going to vary from car to car. But now we're going to go ahead and fit the air refiner. Okay, so we finished installing our fuel refiner. Now we're going to do the air refiner. So in your kit you'll always have two items. That's the air refiner that we're going to install, and there's a little bit of thing that you will want for installation. That's your owner's manual, which is in the bottom of the box, and you'll need a couple of little zip ties and bits and pieces which also come in the kit. So the first thing we're going to do, however, is to have a look at where it needs to go. So we need to install it into your cold air induction, into your air cleaner, but it's got to go in before the filter. So the first thing we've got to understand is in this particular car, the cold air is coming in from underneath, passing through the filter, which is here, and then travelling on into the motor. So we need to install our air refiner into the bottom of the air intake so it's ahead of the air cleaner. So in this case we'll take the top off for a start. So just so we've got a bit more room to move, we're going to unplug the lead, which is going to the mass airflow meter, which is sitting there, and unclip the air cleaner. And we're also going to loosen off the hose clamp on the cold air intake hose there, and we'll just have a quick look if there's anything else. We've got a little breather pipe there and a cable holder. So with that off, there's our air cleaner top removed, easy as that. So there's our air cleaner, so your air comes from underneath that, through that, and down into your engine. So we'll remove the air cleaner element. You can see the dirtier side is the bottom, because that's where the air's coming in, and you can also see there's some residue and so forth in the bottom. So what we've got to do is we've got to find a location in here where we can mount our air refining device, somewhere in the bottom half of this assembly. So I'm just going to, first of all, before I do that, I'm just going to get a vacuum and I'm going to clean all these leaves and dirt and dust out of there before we go ahead, and then we'll select a location. Okay, in this case also, there's a number of places I can mount to using these ribs inside, but I'd rather mount the air refiner into the intake duct. Now in this particular case, whilst it's hard to get to in the car, it's actually really easy by just taking those 3 bolts out to actually remove the air cleaner base from the car entirely, and we'll do it on the bench, which for this job is actually going to be a lot easier. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to mount this against this nice flat surface in here, halfway along the box. And to do that, we're going to do all our hole marking on the outside. So we're going to do all our marking on the outside, and then we'll transfer it to the inside. So what we're going to do is just line that up pretty much where we want it, and then staying just inside the end caps. We're going to just drill 4 holes like that. There's 1. 2. 3, 4. Okay, so there's our 4 holes. Now what we're then going to do is, in your fitting kit in the bottom of your box you'll find some zip ties. And we're going to pass them through and just start them. Okay, so that we've got a couple of nice loops in between. Now you'll also have a little sticky pad inside your fitting kit as well, so just attach that to your air refiner and line that up where you want it to go, and then we'll just pull our zip ties closed. So pull them nice and tight, and then what you should have is your air refiner sitting on top of its little pad, and with your retaining bands just on the inside of the caps. Okay, so once you're happy with that, just snip your tails off, and we're ready to go and reinstall that back into the.
No.
So the installation will be just the reverse of what you did to take it apart. So we'll go ahead and we'll get that put back together. Okay, so our air cleaner base is back in, so we'll just get our 3 mounting bolts back into place. Okay, so what you can see now is our air cleaner base is back in. Our cold air is coming in through this hole through here, and it's going to come into this chamber, past the air refiner, and then it will pass upwards through the air cleaner element, which goes there, and on through into the engine. So we'll just go ahead now and we'll assemble the rest of the air cleaner. Just make sure that anything you disconnected you reconnect. So we've got a vacuum pipe there, goes back on. We've tightened that up. We find our mass airflow meter plug, plug that back in. Cable mount back on, that's tight, clips are on, everything's in. That's it, we're done with the installation. Now we've just got one more thing to do, which is to run through the old fuel in the fuel line and give the engine a chance to become familiar with the new treated fuel. Okay, so now that we've finished the installation, the fuel in the fuel tank will now be treated with the GreenTech, but the fuel that's existing in the fuel lines between the fuel tank and the engine won't be. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the car and we're going to run it at about 3,500 RPM, which is about half to 2/3 of the RPM of whatever motor you're working on, for about 5 minutes, and that should give enough time for the new fuel to come through and for the engine to become familiar with it. So Cedric's going to go ahead and start her up. Going to run it there for about 5 minutes and then see how we go from there. Okay, so that's it. We've run the car now for 5 or 6 minutes, which is plenty of time for the treated fuel to come through. So that's the end of the installation. So from now on, if you've been taking your fuel readings and you know what you've been getting prior to installation, now you can go ahead, fill your car up and start to take new readings, and you'll be able to measure the savings in fuel you're getting from here on in. So that's a pretty standard sedan installation, and we can provide further information for other types of vehicles if required. Okay, so good luck and good savings. Thanks, Edwin.